6 months pregnant, I discovered my husband's secret wedding. Hours later, he was so shocked, he forgot how to say my name. Before we go any further, make sure you subscribe if you believe love should be built on truth, not secrets. And if you've ever felt something was wrong but ignored it, stay with me. This story starts right there. My name is Lauren, and until that cold October morning, when my world collapsed, I swore on my life that my husband Grayson could never cheat. Not just that he wouldn't cheat on me, but that he truly couldn't. I believed that betrayal simply didn't exist in his DNA. Grayson had a way of making everyone around him feel like they were the most important person in his life. When I mentioned craving chocolate cake at 2 in the afternoon, he would surprise me after work with a gift box from Romano's, the expensive bakery at the end of town, with my name written in delicate handwriting across the top. When Jack, our 5-year-old son, became obsessed with a toy robot that cost more than our entire monthly shopping budget, Grayson would drive to 3 different stores until he found it, handing it to Jack in such an exaggerated way that the boy's eyes lit up like Christmas lights. My wife and child are the most important people in my life, he would often say at dinner parties, one hand pulling me close, the other ruffling Jack's hair. The way he said it, with confidence and warmth, made everyone in the room smile knowingly. We were that couple, the kind people looked at and thought, that's what real love looks like. When my parents fell ill in the winter of our 6th year, Grayson stayed by their hospital bed every single night, caring for them with devotion. He often came home completely exhausted, his clothes reeking of hospital disinfectant, but he never complained. Family takes care of family, he would say, as if there were no other choice. I truly believed that even if every man on this earth were unfaithful, even if cheating became as common as breathing, Grayson would still be the one exception. He was proof that good men still existed, that fairy tale love could still exist in the real world, that some promises really were forever. My absolute faith in his loyalty became cruelly ironic when I later thought about the double life he had been living. Only afterward did I piece everything together and realize his affair had begun in the 2nd year of our marriage, when I was still floating in newlywed happiness, when I was planning our first anniversary and dreaming about the children we would have together. For 6 years, Grayson perfected the art of deception, and I was his unwilling audience, applauding his performance night after night. The first crack in my perfect world appeared on a Tuesday morning in October, when I was 6 months pregnant with our 2nd child. I'd been having the restless, broken sleep that comes with pregnancy, waking often to shift positions or go to the bathroom. At 3:17 a.m., unable to get comfortable, I reached for my phone to check the time, and maybe read something to lull myself back to sleep. That was when I saw the notification that changed everything. My family shared a photo album through a cloud storage service, a digital scrapbook, where we uploaded pictures of Jack's school events, family dinners, and random moments we wanted to keep. The notification said a new photo had been added to the Family Memories album. Curious about what Grayson might have uploaded from his business trip, I opened the album. The newest image was a family portrait, but not of my family. The photo showed Grayson standing behind a woman I had never seen, both of his hands resting protectively on her shoulders. Between them stood a little girl, around 4 years old, with Grayson's signature green eyes and the same stubborn cowlick as Jack. They were posing in front of what looked like a professional photography backdrop, all 3 of them smiling with a natural closeness that couldn't be faked. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. The timestamp showed the picture had been taken just 2 days earlier, when Grayson was supposed to be attending a sales conference in Chicago. The woman was simply beautiful, with kind eyes and a comfortable, honest beauty that came from real happiness. She wore a simple blue dress that set off her pale skin, and her hand rested on the little girl's shoulder. But what made me hesitate was the way Grayson looked at them. I had seen that expression on his face 1,000 times, that soft, protective love I had believed was only meant for me and my son. As I sat there in the darkness, my swollen belly pressed against my ribs, the photo disappeared, erased, gone as if it had never existed. But the image had already burned itself, carved itself into my memory like a permanent mark. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house moving around me, trying to build innocent explanations for what I had just seen. Maybe it was a photo of Grayson with a client's family, even though that seemed very unlikely. Maybe it was an old photo uploaded by mistake, even though the clothes he was wearing showed it had been taken recently. Maybe there would be some reasonable explanation when Grayson came home, and I could ask him about it. But even as I thought of these possibilities, I knew I was lying to myself. The intimacy in that photo was unmistakable, and the resemblance between Grayson and that little girl was too clear, too sharp, to be a coincidence. As dawn broke, I heard movement in the living room. Soft whispers and the gentle rustle of fabric told me that Grayson's mother and sister were awake unusually early. I glanced at my phone, 4:50 a.m. "Mom, this dress is too tight. Can you help me zip it up?" I recognized Avery's voice, trying to keep it low so as not to wake me. "Oh my, I'm not even ready yet. Give me a second," my mother-in-law, Victoria, answered. They tried to be quiet, but in the pre-dawn stillness of the house, their whispers carried clearly through the thin walls. Just as I swung my legs out of bed, I heard Avery's voice again, even softer than before. "Mom, lower your voice. Don't let her hear." That sentence sent a chill down my spine. In 8 years of living together, I had never heard my sister-in-law speak about me with such secrecy and caution. Avery and I were not very close. She was 10 years younger than me and always seemed to see me as someone intruding on the family. But we had always maintained a polite relationship. That furtive whisper suggested something far more troubling than normal family courtesy. I pulled on my robe and quietly stepped into the living room, where I saw Victoria and Avery standing in front of a full-length mirror. Both of them were dressed formally. Victoria in an elegant burgundy dress, and Avery in a fluffy pink gown, that looked very much like a wedding guest outfit. Victoria's salt and pepper hair was styled in an elaborate updo, and Avery had clearly spent a lot of time on her makeup. "Mom! Avery!" I called out, my voice making them both jump. They startled as if I had fired a gun. "Where are you going so early, all dressed up like this?" Panic showed in their eyes immediately and unmistakably. They exchanged a look full of shared secrets and careful planning. Avery recovered first, forcing a smile, but it sounded hollow in the quiet room. "Oh, you must have misunderstood, sis," she said, using a suddenly sweet tone that sounded more condescending than affectionate. "I just told Mom to keep her voice down so she wouldn't wake you. You need your rest." She placed a hand on her chest in an exaggerated display of concern. "A distant cousin of ours is getting married today," Victoria added, nervously smoothing her dress. "Out in the countryside. We have to leave early so we can drive there before the ceremony starts at 10 o'clock. "I understand," I nodded, even though every instinct in my body told me they were lying. "Sounds nice. Avery, wait a moment before you go." I disappeared into the bedroom, took out my jewelry box, and searched for a special item I had bought a few months earlier during a shopping trip with my sister. It was a simple brooch, but inside it hid a tiny digital camera that could stream video live to my smartphone. I had bought it as a novelty. I had never used it. Until now. "Here," I said, returning to the living room and carefully pinning the brooch onto Avery's dress, just below her left shoulder, where it would have a clear view. "This will go perfectly with your dress." Avery's eyes lit up with genuine pleasure, the first real emotion I had seen from her that morning. "Oh, it's beautiful." "It is," I replied, adjusting the angle slightly to make sure the camera placement was optimal. The moment the door closed behind them, I rushed back to the bedroom and opened the monitoring app on my phone. The brooch had become my eyes and ears, streaming everything Avery experienced directly to my device. But before I could even focus on the live feed, I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the sound of painful moaning coming from Jack's bedroom. I saw my 5-year-old son lying in bed, his cheeks flushed red, his breathing shallow and rapid. When I placed my hand on his forehead, his skin burned with heat. The digital thermometer confirmed my worst fear, 40 degrees Celsius. Jack had suffered a febrile seizure more than a month earlier, a terrifying convulsion that left him unconscious and his lips turning blue while paramedics struggled to stabilize him. The emergency room doctor had been very clear about the danger. A fever above 39 degrees Celsius could trigger another seizure, with the possible risk of permanent brain damage. "Mommy," Jack whispered, his voice weak and confused. "I don't feel well." "I know, my love," I said, trying to keep my voice steady while my heart pounded in my chest. "We're going to make you feel better very soon." My first call was to Avery, but it went straight to voicemail. Next, I tried calling Victoria, with the same result. In desperation, I called Grayson, even though he was supposed to be in Chicago attending a business conference. Surely, when he learned that his son was seriously ill, he would find a way to come home immediately. His phone went to voicemail after just 2 rings. I was 6 months pregnant, caring for a child who needed immediate medical attention, and completely alone. The nearest hospital was 15 minutes away by car, but I couldn't safely carry Jack in this condition, and I was terrified of what might happen if he had a seizure while I was driving. In desperation, I dialed 119. At the emergency room, the smell of disinfectant and the harsh fluorescent lights created a sense of urgency that made everything feel even more frightening. The triage nurse took one quick look at Jack's condition and immediately led us into an examination room where a young doctor began a rapid assessment. "His temperature is still rising," she explained after finishing the exam. "We need to admit him for monitoring and bring his fever down. Febrile seizures in children who have had them before can be very serious." I nodded, trying to understand the medical terms while holding back tears. The weight of isolation crashed down on me like a final blow. I was 6 months pregnant and terrified for my son's life, while the people who were supposed to be my family had vanished without a trace. I sat on the uncomfortable plastic chair outside Jack's room, one hand resting on my swollen belly, and felt lonelier than I had ever felt before. The baby kicked, as if sensing my pain, and I whispered reassurances to both of my children, the one fighting a fever in the hospital bed, and the one growing inside me. An hour later, I dialed Grayson's number with trembling fingers. This time, after a few rings, he picked up. "Hi, baby," his voice came through the phone, mixed with background noise that definitely did not belong to any business conference I had ever attended. I could hear laughter, music, and something that sounded like glasses clinking together. "Grayson, where are you?" I asked, my voice shaking with exhaustion and fear. There was a pause that stretched for a few seconds. "Just helping a friend out with something," he said, and I could hear the careful calculation in his voice. "What's wrong? You sound upset." "Our son has a very high fever," I said, the words rushing out. "He's in the hospital. I need you to come home right now." Another pause, this one longer. In the background, I heard a DJ making an announcement, and the unmistakable sound of people celebrating. "Baby, I really can't leave right now," he finally said. "This is a very important situation. I have to take care of something here. Why don't I call Avery? She can come stay with you at the hospital." The irony of his suggestion would have been funny if it hadn't hurt so much. "Avery isn't available," I said. "She and your mother went to some wedding." "Oh," he said. "Well, maybe they can." His words were cut off by a woman's voice in the background, clear enough for me to hear even from far away. "Grayson, your daughter wants to know when we're taking pictures." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in shock, the words looping in my head like a broken record. Your daughter. Not a daughter or someone's daughter, but his daughter. The photo in the family album suddenly made complete sense. The little girl with Grayson's eyes was not a client's child or some random lookalike. She was his daughter. And if that little girl really existed, then the woman in the photo, the woman with the kind eyes and easy beauty, was not just his mistress. She was the mother of his child. I remembered Grayson mentioning calling Avery, and suddenly I remembered the brooch. With trembling hands, I turned on the monitoring app on my phone, desperate to understand what was happening in my shattered world. Avery's voice came through the earpiece, sharp and irritated. "Grayson, are you crazy? Mom and I are on our way to your wedding. You think I'm going to drop everything and run to the hospital to babysit that kid? Besides, your wife loves making drama. It's probably just a mild fever, and it'll go away on its own." Then she hung up, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Wedding. His wedding. Through the tiny camera lens, I could see the look of contempt on Avery's face as she talked about me and my act. But more brutal than her contempt was the casual way she talked about Grayson's wedding, as if it were a completely normal family event, just without the presence of his actual legal wife. I let out a sound, a rough, broken sound, that caught the attention of a nurse walking by. A small child with his mother pointed at me and whispered, "Mom, is she crazy?" Yes, I went crazy. The live feed from the brooch kept going, and I followed Avery and Victoria as they arrived at what was clearly the wedding venue. The parking lot was packed with cars, and I could see elegantly dressed guests walking toward a building decorated with white ribbons and flowers. Through the lens, I saw Grayson walking toward Avery and Victoria, looking handsome in a dark suit I had never seen before. Standing next to him was the woman from the photo, Olivia, as I would later learn her name. She was even more beautiful in person, with a glow that brides usually have. She greeted Victoria and Avery with warm hugs, as if they were long-lost family members and not people she had just met. But I realized they had not just met. The ease between them, the comfortable closeness in their greetings, showed they had planned this for a long time. The ceremony began, and through the hidden camera, I watched my marriage fully collapse with my own eyes. Grayson and Olivia stood together at an altar, decorated with white roses and baby's breath, surrounded by about 50 guests, all of them celebrating something they clearly thought was joyful. When the officiant, a cheerful woman in a flowing dress who reminded me of my college literature professor, told Grayson to kiss the bride, I watched my husband, with tears in his eyes, turn to another woman with the same tenderness I had believed belonged only to me. The kiss was long, sweet, and unbearably painful, and clearly real. This was not just a story of a man cheating. This was a man who had loved someone else, someone who seemed to make him far happier than I ever did. I began taking screenshots in a panic, capturing every angle of their betrayal. The joy on their faces, the applause of the guests, the elaborate decorations that someone had spent weeks planning, proof of a life Grayson had built alongside ours. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I turned off the phone and sat in the hospital hallway, trying to process the full weight of what I had just discovered. My husband was a bigamist. His family was complicit in his deception. And I was alone, 6 months pregnant, with a sick child and a marriage that had apparently been broken for years without me ever knowing. That was when the pain hit. At first, I felt a sharp stab in my lower abdomen, nothing like the normal aches of pregnancy. I looked down and saw blood seeping through my maternity dress. I had been so focused on Jack's fever and Grayson's betrayal that I hadn't noticed the slick puddle of water on the hospital bathroom floor. My fall was hard, the impact shaking my already strained body beyond what it could bear. A nurse appeared almost immediately, followed by an entire medical team. The world blurred into urgent voices, rolling gurneys, and the strong smell of disinfectant. The last thing I remember before I blacked out was the doctor's serious voice. "There is no fetal heartbeat." When I woke up a few hours later, it was already afternoon. Lisa was sitting by my hospital bed, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She had driven 4 hours from her home in Pennsylvania as soon as she called to check on me, and instead got a response from the hospital. "Lauren, my love," she whispered, taking my hand. "Everything will be okay." I didn't need to ask her. The emptiness in my belly told me everything I needed to know. The baby I had been carrying, the child I had dreamed of and cherished, was gone. "Where's Jack?" I tried to ask, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube they had used during surgery. "He's much better," Lisa reassured me quickly. "His fever has completely gone down. He's in the pediatric ward, and the doctor says he can go home tomorrow." I nodded, closing my eyes against the wave of relief and grief that threatened to crash over me. At least Jack was safe. No matter what happened, my firstborn son would be okay. "Where is Grayson?" Lisa asked, her voice carrying a fury I had never heard before. The hospital tried to reach him, but couldn't. What kind of man abandons his family when they need him most? And so, lying in that sterile hospital bed with my best friend's hand gripping mine, I told her everything. The photo, the secret wedding, the lies, the betrayal. I showed her the screenshots I had taken, proof of a parallel life my husband had been living for years. By the time I finished the story, Lisa's face had gone through a series of emotions, disbelief, horror, and finally the cold, focused fury of a lawyer that reminded me why I had always felt safe with her beside me. "We're going to make him pay for this," she said quietly. "For every lie, every betrayal, every moment of pain he caused you and Jack, he will learn that there are consequences for destroying a family." I began systematically documenting our marital finances. Even though Grayson tried to control the household money, I had always been deeply involved in managing it. I held a degree in economics, with a master's in business administration, and I handled everything from tax filings to investment portfolios. What I discovered when I carefully reviewed our accounts was both useful and infuriating. Over the past 3 years, Grayson had been steadily transferring money from our joint account into investments and savings held solely in his name. He had also been claiming business expenses for what I now realized were probably costs for his second family. But more importantly, I discovered that Grayson had been very thorough in his financial planning. We had taken out significant life insurance, something he had insisted on when Jack was born, claiming he wanted to make sure the family would be secure. I pushed all the evidence toward Lisa. She read very fast, but without rushing. Her eyes moved over every screenshot, every printed email, every frame I had captured from the brooch camera on Avery's chest. I could clearly see each step of emotion crossing Lisa's face. First the concern of a friend, then the shock as the pieces started to fit together, and finally the cold, razor-sharp anger of a lawyer who had seen too many dirty games. "Lauren," she said slowly, as if afraid I might miss the meaning. "This isn't just betrayal or morals anymore. This is wire fraud. Fraud. And with the way they used the banking system, used fake stories to move money. This is organized conspiracy, not a one-off thing." She paused, her eyes never leaving the numbers. "If this is investigated properly, it could absolutely turn into a federal case. The kind where people actually go to prison, not just apologize and walk away. Grayson could sit for 3 years, or more, depending on how hard he tries to fight it." I swallowed hard, my throat dry and burning. Lisa opened her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she pulled up verdicts, similar cases from legal databases I had never seen before. The screen filled with unfamiliar names, indictments dozens of pages long, and sentences with numbers like 36 months, 48 months of prison. "Victoria and Avery," Lisa continued, her voice dropping. "If it can be proven they knew about that wedding, knew Grayson was living 2 parallel lives, and still actively helped hide it, they could be seen as accomplices, aiding a conspiracy to defraud, at least civilly, and if a prosecutor gets interested, they won't walk away clean either." She pointed to messy lines of law on the screen and explained each part in simpler language. "You have everything," Lisa said, turning to look straight at me. "Screenshots, audio from the brooch, transfer histories, the second marriage registration you captured from Avery's camera, even hotel receipts Grayson paid for with the joint card. This is a defendant's nightmare and a prosecutor's dream. We sat there in that hospital room. Lisa helped me rebuild the entire timeline. From the second year of my marriage, up to the day the secret wedding was recorded by the brooch. She highlighted it with markers, clipped sections together with colored sticky notes, sorted the evidence. Images, audio, transfers, potential witness statements. And then, when everything had almost been neatly arranged into a cold structure, called a case file, Lisa stopped, capped her pen, and looked at me for a long time before saying the thing I knew I wouldn't want to hear, but couldn't avoid. "There's one thing you have to decide, Lauren. What you want him to lose, money, freedom, reputation, and what you're willing to pay to take back the rest of your life and Jack's. I can handle the law part, but the facing it, the enduring what comes after, only you can do that." That night, even though the doctors had not approved my discharge, I signed the form taking full responsibility and left the hospital. I left Jack sleeping deeply in Lisa's arms. She hugged me tightly at the doorway and said, "Go. Hit them so hard they won't be able to lift their heads." Back home, I put on the same navy dress Grayson once said made my eyes look the brightest. My hair was still messy from lying in a hospital bed all day, but I didn't bother to fix it. I wanted them to see me like someone who had just crawled out of the hell they had thrown me into. In my handbag, my phone already set to recording, a thick 120-page file Lisa had bound in a hard black cover, and a large envelope filled with all the color printouts of the screenshots. The taxi stopped in front of Olivia's building at almost 7 p.m. Warm yellow light spilled from the large windows, and when I looked up, I saw the third floor glowing like a stage. The window curtains were not drawn. Tiny decorative lights hung along the balcony, white lights sparkling like a model home in a wedding catalog. They didn't even bother to hide. I rang the doorbell. It took a few seconds before the door opened. Grayson stood there, white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, hair still smelling of gel, looking less like a man who had just legally married another woman, and more like an actor who had just finished a perfect performance. "Lauren?" He froze, only for half a second. Then the acting instinct kicked back in. "What are you doing here? You should be resting." I didn't answer. I walked past him. Olivia's apartment looked exactly like what I had imagined if my entire life had been a joke. White sheer curtains, baby's breath flowers stuffed into crystal vases, half-burned scented candles on porcelain plates with gold rims. On the dining table was an English-style teapot set, with steam still clinging to the sides. Victoria was sitting on the sofa like she owned the place. She was straightening a decorative pillow, very slowly, very carefully. Avery stood near the window, holding a glass of red wine, looking so comfortable it was surreal, as if I were the intruder. They looked at me. No one stood up. 1 second, 2 seconds. The air was thick, like heavy honey. Olivia stepped out of the kitchen. Cream silk dress, low bun, light makeup, that glow of a newlywed still on her face. When she saw me, she paused, but she didn't panic. She only tilted her head slightly, as if rearranging the scene in her mind. Grayson closed the door behind me. The small click sounded like a coffin latch. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, trying to soften his voice. I put my bag down on the table, slowly, on purpose, so they could see it. "I came to greet the family," I said. My voice was so calm, it felt foreign, even to me. "I see everyone is here. Mother, sister, new wife." Avery tightened her grip on her glass of wine, her nails turning white. Victoria's hands stiffened on her lap. Olivia looked at Grayson. "You said everything was already handled." Grayson didn't look at her. His eyes were glued to me. "Congratulations," I said, my voice light as wind, but clear enough for everyone to hear. "A beautiful day. Also the day I miscarried our second child." Only then did Grayson's eyes drop to my stomach, and he stepped forward urgently. "Lauren, where's the baby? Calm down. Let me explain." "No need to explain." I pushed his hand away and pulled the black file out of my bag. "I came to give you a wedding gift." Audio recordings, screenshots, timelines of the money he had transferred from our joint account into investments and savings only in his name. But tonight, I only needed one thing. For them to know that I had seen everything. Olivia whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't know anything. He said he was already divorced. That sentence fell into place like the final piece of a puzzle. All those company seminars, the urgent business trips, the nights he was staying late at the office to finish reports. How many of those were actually Grayson drinking wine with Olivia, choosing wedding flowers, picking a name for their daughter? I looked straight into Grayson's eyes. How many dates with your new wife did you call meetings? He dropped his head and nodded miserably. It was just work. Work, I repeated, my voice icy. Are you really that uncreative, Grayson? Couldn't you think of something better? Victoria jumped up, trying to take back control. This doesn't matter. Grayson and Olivia are each other's destiny. And you, Lauren, you were just temporary. I laughed, for the first time genuinely laughing in this room full of champagne smell and fake roses. Temporary enough to pay for the Wedgwood china set sitting on that table? Temporary enough to pay for the 3-carat diamond ring on Olivia's hand? Temporary enough to pay international school tuition for your daughter while my son had to go to public school because of tight budget? Silence. Dead silence. I pulled out the black file that Lisa had helped me finish that afternoon. Page numbered, color tabbed, professional, like any file I had ever submitted to federal court. I slammed it down onto what was left of the wedding cake, sinking it deep into the white buttercream. Want to know what this is? I opened the file and flipped each page so everyone could see clearly. My still legally valid marriage certificate with Grayson. Bank statements showing $68,000 transferred over 4 years. Live stream images from Avery's brooch camera. The whole family laughing at the wedding while my child lay in a hospital bed. Victoria tried to grab the file, and I pressed my hand down hard. Not your turn. I lifted each page so the entire room could see. My lawyer, Lisa Brennan, federal financial crime specialist, calls this perfect evidence of wire fraud and organized conspiracy. Grayson stammered, Lawyer? I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and let the screen glow with the name Lisa Brennan, FBI referral ready. All it takes is one call, I said, my finger gliding lightly over the call button. And tomorrow, the police will be at the door, accounts frozen, passports seized. Grayson goes to prison. And your mother and sister. I looked at Victoria and Avery. If the court can prove they knew, helped cover it up, organized the secret wedding, or benefited from shared money, accomplices. The room went completely still. Victoria clutched her chest, breathing hard. Avery started sobbing uncontrollably. I leaned down and said, quietly but loud enough for everyone to hear. But the part you'll hate the most hasn't even started yet. I closed my bag. And for the first time since I had stepped into that woman's apartment, I saw real fear on their faces. Back at the hospital, I was still going through the paperwork when my phone rang at 3:17 a.m. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Harper, this is Officer Martinez. I'm calling regarding a traffic accident involving your husband, Grayson Harper. My heart stopped. It was a single vehicle collision. The driver appeared to be intoxicated, and the car left the road at high speed. I'm very sorry to inform you that your husband was pronounced dead at the scene. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. Grayson was dead. Mrs. Harper, are you still there? I trembled as I picked the phone back up. What about the passengers? There were 2 others in the car, Victoria Harper and Avery Harper. Both are in critical condition at the hospital. The doctors they're doing everything they can. Victoria and Avery, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, were clinging to life in intensive care, their brains deprived of oxygen in the crash. The same women who had whispered secrets in my living room that morning were now lying unconscious, their futures uncertain. If they hadn't gone to Grayson's secret wedding, if they hadn't celebrated his second marriage, this wouldn't have happened. But life doesn't have ifs, only consequences. The insurance payout was enormous, more than I had ever imagined. The life insurance alone was worth nearly $1 million, and the accidental death benefit was double that amount. Auto insurance covered property damage and medical costs, and there were additional policies through Grayson's company that I had forgotten even existed. The largest sum of money I had ever received in my life came from my husband's death, an irony so bitter I could almost taste it. I arranged Grayson's funeral. A simple service, closed casket, minimal flowers. I invited his coworkers and a few close family friends, but I did not invite Olivia or her daughter. No matter what she thought she was entitled to, she had no right to publicly mourn a man who was legally married to someone else. As for Victoria and Avery, who remained in a vegetative state with severely impaired brain function, I had no legal obligation to make care decisions for them. They were not my responsibility. I called my father-in-law, who lived in Florida, and had been estranged from Victoria for years after his own affair. Ironically, they had never divorced. Robert, I said when he answered, I'm calling to tell you there's been an accident. Grayson is dead, and your wife and daughter are in the hospital. They're going to need long-term care, and someone will have to make decisions about their treatment. My God, he exhaled. What happened? I gave him the basic facts without adding any commentary, then concluded. I'm moving out of state with Jack. What happens with Victoria and Avery is up to you. Lauren, you can't abandon them, he protested. They're family. Victoria is your son's grandmother. I let out a dry laugh with no humor in it. Honestly, Robert, I wasn't your only daughter-in-law. On the day I lost my child, your son and his family were celebrating a wedding with another woman, with Victoria and Avery's blessing. They stopped seeing me as family a long time ago. I'm not going to carry the burden of people who actively helped destroy my marriage. With the insurance money and the proceeds from selling the house, I had more than enough to start over. I bought a modest but comfortable home in another state, enrolled Jack in an excellent private school, and began building a life that belonged entirely to us. Jack, resilient the way children often are, adapted to the new reality with surprising gentleness. Of course he missed his father, but somehow he also seemed to feel that our new life was safer and cleaner than the one we had before. As soon as we started to feel settled in the new house, Olivia showed up at our front door. Somehow, she had tracked down our address and arrived unannounced one Saturday morning with her daughter. "I know you don't want to see me," Olivia said, her voice still aggressive even as she tried to sound reasonable. "But we need to talk about Grayson's assets. This little girl is his biological daughter, and she has rights." I invited them inside, curious to hear what she had to say. Olivia immediately made demands, insisting that she and her daughter were entitled to half of Grayson's estate. "We were already married," she declared, holding up a certificate from what looked like a wedding chapel. "That makes me his widow, not you. And my daughter is his real child, which means she has inheritance rights above anything your son might have." I listened to her entire speech with growing amusement, then calmly took out my phone and began recording our conversation. "No," I said evenly and professionally. "I think you should speak to a lawyer before making any more claims. What you're describing is bigamy, a felony in this state. Grayson was legally married to me, and there was never a divorce, which means your marriage has no legal value at all." Her confidence began to collapse. "Moreover," I continued, "any money Grayson gave you during the affair is technically marital property belonging to both of us. If I wanted to sue, I could take you to court and demand reimbursement for every gift, every trip, every dollar he spent on you and your daughter while he was deceiving me." Olivia's face went pale, and I could see her calculating the financial consequences of what I was saying. "But I won't do that," I said, "because I don't want to punish your daughter for her parents' mistakes. However, if you harass my life again, I will file for harassment and pursue every legal remedy available." She nodded silently, picked up her daughter, and left without another word. I never heard from her again. The years that followed were the happiest years of my adult life. Jack thrived at his new school, made friends, and developed hobbies. I started a small consulting firm, using my economics background to help people manage their finances and plan for the future. A few well-meaning friends tried to set me up with decent men, insisting that I was too young to live alone for the rest of my life. But I eventually understood the difference between being lonely and being alone, and I realized I genuinely liked my independence. My small business grew into something bigger and more successful than I had ever imagined. I specialized in helping women going through divorce, guiding them on how to protect their assets and plan their financial futures. Through word of mouth, I gained clients from all over the region, women who needed someone who understood the specific challenges of rebuilding a life after betrayal. Sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and Jack was asleep, I thought about the life I might have kept living if that photo had never appeared in the family album. I might have stayed married to Grayson for many more years, even decades, never knowing about Olivia and their daughter, never understanding that the love I thought we shared was only half the truth. I might have raised my second child in ignorance, teaching them to believe in promises that had already been broken, to believe in a version of family that existed only in my imagination. The accident that took Grayson's life and destroyed his secret wedding initially felt like the deepest tragedy. But looking back, I realized it was actually a release, a brutal but necessary ending to a beautiful lie. The tiny camera brooch I had pinned onto Avery's dress now sits in my jewelry box, a reminder of the day I learned to trust my instincts instead of hope. I learned that love is not a shelter built on lies. Real love has to be strong enough to survive in the light, honest enough to exist without secrets, generous enough to put the happiness of the one you love above your own interests. I realized that Grayson had never loved me in that way. He loved the image of me, the role I played in the life he carefully built, the safety and stability I provided while he chased real happiness somewhere else. But I learned to love myself in that way, with honesty, with respect, with a fierce protection that refuses to accept anything less than real connection. Victoria and Avery both died within a year after the accident, never waking up. I felt no grief and no relief at their passing, only a quiet closing of a chapter in my life, a chapter shaped by their willful blindness to their son's deception. I came to understand that Grayson's betrayal created victims on both sides. Olivia had been deceived too, told that his marriage to me was failing, that a divorce was coming, that he just needed time to sort out legal problems. She had also believed, as I did, that she was building a life with a man who loved her completely. The real tragedy was not that Grayson stopped loving me. Marriages fall apart, feelings change, and people slowly drift away in ways no one can control. The tragedy was that he was too cowardly to end our marriage honestly, too selfish to let both women make their own choices about their lives. After Grayson died, I was invited to speak at a conference for organizations that support women. The topic was surviving betrayal. I almost turned it down. Public speaking had never been my strength, and the subject was deeply personal. But Lisa encouraged me to accept. So I found myself standing in front of 200 women, holding a small pistachio green brooch in my hand, and telling my story. I talked about the photo that shattered my world, the secret wedding that exposed my husband's double life, and the hidden camera that gave me the proof I needed to understand the truth. But mostly, I talked about what came after. The slow, difficult work of rebuilding trust in my own judgment, the process of creating a life based on my real desires instead of other people's expectations, and the surprising discovery that being alone can be infinitely better than being with someone who doesn't truly see you. After my presentation, dozens of women came up to me with their own stories of betrayal, deception, and the painful journey toward an authentic life. Many of them had endured years of gaslighting, being told their doubts were groundless, their instincts unreliable, their perceptions distorted. Trust your instincts, I told each of them. If something feels wrong, look into it. If the person you love is lying to you, you have a right to know the truth. And if that truth destroys the life you thought you had, remember that it is making room for the life you truly deserve.